She only wanted a safe flight home to see her dying father. Instead, a pregnant black doctor in first class found herself humiliated, denied basic care, and then slapped by the very woman meant to ensure her comfort. But here's what the flight attendant didn't know. This wasn't just any woman, and this wasn't just any flight. Behind that soft voice and tired eyes was a quiet storm. One call would unleash a reckoning 30,000 feet in the air and crash through corporate boardrooms on the ground. Because karma didn't need wings to fly, it was already seated in 1A. At 4:12 p.m., Rachel Walker stood at the entrance to the Orion Air Celestial Lounge at JFK, one hand gripping the strap of her medical bag, the other resting protectively over the swell of her 6-month pregnancy. Her boarding pass clearly read First Class, Suite 1A, yet the woman at the counter examined her ID like it was counterfeit. "I'm sorry, Dr. Walker," the lounge attendant said without looking up. "There's a system flag on your reservation. We can't allow you to enter until it's cleared." Rachel blinked. "That's not possible. I booked directly. I even got a confirmation from your concierge service." "Ma'am, you'll need to step aside. We're on a tight boarding schedule." The word "ma'am" landed with a thud. Polite, clinical, dismissive. Rachel's jaw tightened as she moved aside, her heart beginning to thump faster. It was just a technical glitch, she told herself. She was a respected pediatric cardiologist, used to controlling chaos in operating rooms. This was nothing. But then came Deborah Hastings. Blonde, mid-50s, crisp uniform, posture like a steel rod. Her badge identified her as Purser, Flight 111. And her eyes scanned Rachel the same way she'd probably scanned uncooperative passengers for the past 2 decades, with immediate judgment. "You're the one causing the delay?" Deborah asked without preamble. Rachel lifted her chin. "There seems to be an issue with the system recognizing my ticket." Deborah narrowed her eyes. "And you're flying in Suite 1A?" "That's correct." Deborah's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Interesting." Before Rachel could respond, Deborah turned to the lounge agent. "Run her name again, slowly this time. Let's not send unverified guests into the premium cabins." Rachel inhaled deeply, forcing calm. Her father's condition in London had taken a sharp downturn overnight. There was no time to argue with petty gatekeepers. Still, her pulse pounded in her ears. As the agent began rechecking the system, Rachel leaned forward. "May I ask what the system flag says?" "It says, identity verification pending," the agent replied, almost apologetic now. "That makes no sense. I scanned my passport through your app 2 hours ago. I'm TSA pre-check, global entry. I've never had an issue." Deborah folded her arms. "Do you often fly with Orion? Dr. Walker, was it?" Rachel didn't answer. She didn't know this woman her flight history. She turned back to the agent. "Is there a supervisor available?" At that moment, a soft voice interrupted. "Excuse me, Dr. Walker?" Rachel turned. A young flight attendant stood nearby. Brown eyes, chestnut ponytail, neatly pressed uniform. Her name tag read Chloe Mason. She looked nervous, but sincere. "I overheard. I believe you're our priority passenger in 1A, yes? I can walk you through manually. We just had a back-end syncing issue with the new check-in system." Deborah's head snapped toward Chloe. "That's not protocol. She needs to wait until the system clears." Chloe didn't flinch. "Ms. Hastings, Captain Rollins gave me authorization to manually assist priority passengers after last week's system update. This qualifies." Deborah stared her down, but Chloe didn't waver. Rachel gave her a nod of quiet gratitude. "Thank you." With Chloe leading the way, they exited the lounge. As they walked, Rachel whispered, "I appreciate what you just did." Chloe gave a tight smile. "We get trained to serve passengers, not to intimidate them. I've seen too much of that lately." They arrived at the gate just as final boarding for Flight 111 was announced. Chloe guided Rachel through the separate jet bridge for first class. The hallway was bathed in warm light, and for the first time that day, Rachel exhaled deeply. The boarding attendant barely glanced at her pass this time. No red flags, no questions. Just a courteous, "Welcome aboard, Dr. Walker." Inside the aircraft, the scent of cedar and white tea lingered in the air. Soft, instrumental jazz played in the background. Chloe gestured to the front left suite. "Here we are, 1A." Rachel stepped in and let herself sink into the buttery leather seat. The cabin was hushed, a cocoon of serenity. Her body sighed in relief. Chloe leaned in. "Can I get you anything right away? Water? A warm towel?" Rachel smiled softly. "A bottle of water would be amazing. I'll be right back." As Chloe disappeared into the galley, Rachel reached down and gently rubbed her belly. Her baby kicked in response, a fluttering reassurance. The worst, she thought, was over, but she was wrong. From the aisle came the sharp clack of approaching heels. Rachel looked up. Deborah stood there, arms crossed, eyes colder than before. "You made it on," she said flatly. "I did," Rachel replied, voice even. "Well then," Deborah said, glancing down at Rachel's coat and carry-on. "Let's make sure you're in compliance." Rachel opened her mouth to speak, but stopped. Something about Deborah's tone wasn't procedural. It was personal. The undercurrent of disdain was no longer subtle, and in that moment, Rachel felt it. The shift. This wasn't about systems or policies or boarding flags. This was about her, the wrong kind of passenger in the wrong kind of seat. And as the cabin door sealed behind the last boarding call, Rachel sensed it deep in her gut. This flight wasn't going to be the escape she'd hoped for. It was just beginning. Rachel adjusted in her seat, the leather cool against her back. The suite was spacious by airline standards, but at 6 months pregnant, even luxury felt tight. The plane hadn't moved yet, still docked at the gate. Her body ached with fatigue, and a wave of nausea crept up, a cruel reminder that morning sickness didn't always respect trimesters. She reached up and pressed the call button. Deborah appeared almost instantly, as if she'd been waiting. "Yes?" Rachel offered a polite smile. "Could I get a bottle of water, please? I'm feeling a bit lightheaded." Deborah's smile didn't match her eyes. "Full beverage service begins after takeoff, as per FAA regulations." "I understand," Rachel said gently. "But I'm pregnant and a little dehydrated. Just a small bottle would really help." Deborah's eyes flicked down to Rachel's stomach, then back up, her expression unreadable. "We follow procedures for everyone's safety. Please remain seated. Someone will come by later." Without another word, she turned and walked away. Rachel leaned back, closing her eyes. She had treated cardiac arrest in infants, stood for 12 hours in operating rooms, held weeping parents, and delivered impossible news. But somehow, this felt harder. Because here, on this plane, she wasn't a doctor. She was just a problem to be managed. The plane began to taxi. Chloe hadn't returned. The gentle hum of the engines vibrated beneath her feet. Rachel reached down to fasten her seatbelt, but it pressed awkwardly across her belly. She tried adjusting it lower, but it still cut uncomfortably across the top of her uterus. She reached for the call button again. Deborah reappeared. Rachel kept her tone calm. "I'm sorry to trouble you again, but could I get a seatbelt extender? This one's putting pressure on my abdomen." Deborah frowned. "You seem secured to me." "It's not about being secured. It's about safe positioning for the baby. Most airlines recommend extenders for women in the 2nd and 3rd trimester." Deborah's lips thinned. "Extenders are for passengers who physically can't buckle their belts. They are not comfort accessories." Rachel blinked. "I'm not asking for comfort. I'm asking for safety. For my baby." "I see," Deborah said, voice clipped. "You people always want exceptions." The words dropped like lead. Rachel stared at her. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Deborah said, her voice low. "You get on the plane last minute, expect special treatment, don't follow basic instructions, and now you want to rewrite safety protocols." Rachel felt her hands go cold. "I'm asking for something completely standard." Deborah shrugged. "Maybe if you booked economy like everyone else, you'd understand we don't cater to every whim." Rachel's breath caught. She'd experienced bias before, subtle, veiled, but rarely this naked, this direct. Her instincts screamed to de-escalate, but the injustice was suffocating. "I am not asking for a whim," she said evenly. "I'm a physician, a pediatric cardiologist. I know exactly what pressure on the uterus can cause at this stage of pregnancy." Deborah raised an eyebrow. "That's nice, honey. So is my niece. She's a yoga instructor. We all have jobs." Rachel blinked. "That's not the same thing. You're not the only professional on this plane," Deborah continued, straightening. "I've been flying for 22 years. I've kept hundreds of flights safe. I don't need a lecture on anatomy." The plane jolted slightly as it turned onto the runway. Rachel swallowed hard, heart pounding. Her seatbelt still dug uncomfortably into her midsection, and the baby gave a small kick, like punctuation. Deborah leaned in, lowering her voice. "If you'd like to file a request with our corporate policy office, you're welcome to do so after landing." Rachel's voice dropped, calm but firm. "Then please send the captain. I won't be taking off like this." Deborah straightened, eyes narrowing. "Are you refusing to comply with crew instructions during taxi?" "I'm asserting my medical judgment," Rachel replied. "If you're unwilling to follow protocol, I'll escalate appropriately." For a second, Deborah didn't move. Her nostrils flared and her jaw clenched. Then, slowly, she leaned in closer. "You think your fancy degrees or designer purse make you special, but on this plane, I'm in charge. Not you." Rachel said nothing. She didn't flinch, and that seemed to enrage Deborah even more. She stood abruptly and turned down the aisle, disappearing toward the galley. Rachel exhaled, hand gripping the armrest. Her baby kicked again, harder this time. She closed her eyes, breathing deep, trying to slow her pulse. Across the aisle, a man in 2A, young, headphones around his neck, glanced at her. His brows furrowed. He looked like he wanted to say something, but stayed silent. The overhead chime announced final cabin checks. Rachel adjusted herself one more time, shifting the belt as best she could. Her skin prickled with humiliation. This wasn't supposed to happen in first class. Not here, not now. From the corner of her eye, she saw Deborah return. No water, no extender, just a tight smile and a final cold glance before moving on to the next passenger. Rachel let her head fall back against the headrest. Her father was waiting. Time was ticking. The plane was lifting off, but something far heavier than jet fuel hung in the air. Whatever this flight was supposed to be, safe, luxurious, respectful, it wasn't. And for the first time, Rachel wasn't sure she'd make it to London without braking. The engines roared beneath them. But Rachel couldn't hear anything except the steady pounding in her ears. Her fingers trembled against the leather armrest. Her baby shifted uneasily beneath her ribs, and the belt across her stomach pressed like a warning. She reached for the call button again. This time, her patience had worn thin. Deborah was there before she could even speak. "I told you," the purser snapped. "We are not distributing extenders for preference. You are properly belted. The plane is moving." Rachel kept her voice low, but firm. "You are compromising the safety of a pregnant passenger, and your refusal violates FAA-advised maternity protocol. I'm asking one last time for a belt extender or a call to the captain." Deborah's face flushed. "You're refusing to comply with my directions. That is a federal offense during active taxi. I could have you removed from this aircraft right now." Rachel exhaled through her nose. "I am not refusing to comply. I'm insisting on safe accommodation. If you won't help me, I'll stand until I can be safely secured." And with that, she slowly pushed herself upward from her seat. Her movement was careful, deliberate, not aggressive, but in Deborah's eyes, it was pure defiance. The cabin gasped as Rachel stood. "What are you doing?" Deborah hissed. "I'm protecting my child." "That's it," Deborah growled. "Sit down or get off this plane." Rachel didn't respond. She reached for the seat divider to steady herself. Deborah stepped closer. "You're a danger to this flight." Rachel turned, eyes calm. "No, I'm a doctor, and I'm done being treated like a threat." Deborah's hand moved so fast it didn't register until the sound followed. A sharp, echoing crack shattered the silence. Rachel stumbled backward into her seat, stunned. Her cheek burned, her vision blurred with shock. A collective gasp rippled through the first-class cabin. For a moment, the world went still. Deborah stood frozen, her chest heaving. Her hand remained midair for a beat too long, like even her body hadn't caught up to what it had just done. Rachel raised a hand to her face, her palm trembling against her stinging skin. Her voice caught in her throat. In 2A, Liam's phone was already recording. The young man's eyes were wide, disbelieving, but his fingers worked with quiet precision. His camera lens caught the entire scene. Rachel's composure, Deborah's fury, the slap. The hum of the engines filled the awkward silence. Then, a voice from the back of first class broke the moment. "She was dangerous," a man exclaimed. "She stood up during taxi. That's a serious violation." Everyone turned. The speaker, a suited man in his late 50s seated in 4C, looked directly at Deborah, then at Rachel. "You did what you had to do," he told the purser. "I saw it. She got up. She was aggressive." Rachel's mouth opened slightly in disbelief. Liam snapped his gaze toward the man. "Are you serious? She asked for a seatbelt extender." "I saw her escalate," the man replied, unshaken. "And you shouldn't be recording crew members. That's illegal." "No," Liam countered, standing now too. "What's illegal is assaulting a pregnant passenger. I have everything on video." Deborah turned, suddenly aware that the balance of power had shifted. Her face had drained of color. Chloe appeared at the front of the cabin, her face pale. What happened?" Deborah spun toward her. "This passenger stood up during taxi. She was combative. I had to intervene." Liam didn't wait. She was calm, respectful. She explained she was pregnant and the belt was unsafe. This woman refused basic accommodations, then hit her. Chloe's eyes flicked to Rachel, still seated, her hand now lowered from her cheek, red blooming across her skin. The plane jolted as it slowed. The engines eased down. Over the intercom came the voice of Captain Rollins, calm, clipped. "Cabin crew, report to the flight deck immediately." Deborah's spine straightened. She looked toward Chloe, who hesitated only a second before speaking. "Ms. Hastings, I think you should go." Deborah's mouth opened in protest, but no sound came out. She turned, straightening her uniform, and disappeared toward the cockpit. Rachel remained in her seat, breathing through her nose, hand over her belly. Her baby fluttered again, an anxious kick, low and sharp. Chloe knelt beside her. "Are you okay?" Rachel nodded slowly. "I felt a sharp cramp. Not bad, but tight. Too tight." Chloe stood instantly. "We're going back to the gate. The captain already called for medical assistance." Behind them, murmurs filled the cabin. Some passengers looked furious, others confused. A few pulled out their phones, whispering to neighbors. In 2A, Liam sat down, his phone still recording. His hands were shaking slightly, but his voice was calm. "She didn't do anything wrong," he muttered to himself. "She was just trying to fly safely." Rachel closed her eyes. Her face ached. Her belly clenched. And the baby she was protecting? Still inside, still moving, still vulnerable. This flight was no longer about getting to her father. It was about making it out in one piece. The aircraft slowed as it veered from the taxiway, wheels humming with a tension that matched every nerve in Rachel's body. She sat still in her seat, but her abdomen was tightening with unmistakable pressure. It wasn't just discomfort anymore. It was cramping, real, rhythmic, and growing. Chloe returned with a bottle of water and a blanket. She knelt down beside Rachel again. "Are you still cramping?" she whispered. Rachel nodded, her breath shallow. "It's getting stronger. I've never felt it like this." Chloe's eyes darkened with concern. "We're almost back at the gate. Captain's ordered medics to meet us on arrival." Rachel's hand moved instinctively to her stomach, fingertips tracing the slight rise of muscle beneath the fabric. The baby hadn't kicked again in the last few minutes. That silence was more terrifying than any slap. The overhead intercom crackled. The captain's voice was crisp, emotionless. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to an onboard security incident, we are returning to the gate. We appreciate your cooperation and patience. More information will be provided shortly." The phrase, "security incident," buzzed through the cabin like static. Conversations ignited in hushed tones. Passengers glanced between Rachel and the galley, trying to piece the story together. In 4C, the older man who had tried to defend Deborah muttered, "This is why we follow rules." A woman across the aisle hushed him. Liam leaned forward in his seat. "Don't worry," he said to Rachel. "The video doesn't lie." Rachel managed a grateful glance, but her focus was narrowing. She was calculating fetal movement intervals in her head, replaying medical lectures about premature labor and maternal trauma. When the wheels finally kissed the gate's rubber stoppers, there was no applause, just an electric hum of anxiety. 2 Port Authority officers were waiting when the cabin door opened. A female officer with a calm face and a firm stance stepped on board first. She whispered something to the captain and then turned toward the cabin. "Dr. Walker?" she asked. Rachel blinked. "Yes. We've been requested to escort you safely off the aircraft and into medical care. Paramedics are already on the jet bridge." Rachel hesitated. I don't want to leave without knowing what's happening. We'll brief you fully, I promise. But first, we need to make sure you and your baby are okay." Chloe helped her up gently. Rachel winced, another cramp stabbing through her lower abdomen. As they reached the cabin door, the hallway to the jet bridge swam in sterile light. Outside, 2 EMTs waited with a stretcher, though Rachel insisted on walking. "I just need a place to sit and breathe," she murmured. One of the medics nodded. "We'll get you to the lounge. Quiet space. Vitals first, then we'll transfer to Lenox Hill if needed." They moved down the corridor, but instead of the direct path to the ambulance bay, they turned left, back toward the Celestial Lounge. Rachel paused. "Why are we going this way?" The lead medic, a tall man with kind eyes, gestured ahead. "Orion's lounge is empty right now. Quieter, cleaner. We've got a setup there while we wait for your OB consult." Rachel's breath caught. That was where all of this had started. The doors slid open with a whisper, revealing the soft glow of ambient light and the low hum of jazz. The chaos of the last hour felt like it had happened in another universe, but the familiarity was jarring. The same polished counters, the same marble floors, and standing near the back, checking his phone, flanked by 2 staff members, was a man in a tailored gray suit. David, the station manager. He looked up as they entered. For a second, his face registered only confusion. Then he saw her face, the redness on her cheek, her hand over her stomach, and the officers flanking her. "Dr. Walker?" Rachel blinked. She hadn't expected recognition. David stepped forward, eyebrows furrowing. I'm so sorry. What happened?" Before she could answer, Chloe, who had followed them, spoke quietly. "There was an incident on board. She was assaulted by the purser." David froze. "Assaulted?" he repeated. Rachel nodded slowly. "By your senior crew member. And now, I'm cramping." David turned pale. He looked at the officers, then at Chloe. "Where's Deborah now?" "Captain called her to the flight deck," Chloe replied. "But it's all on video." David didn't wait. He pulled out his phone, scrolled rapidly, and raised it to his ear. Rachel sat down carefully on a lounge chaise. The medic took her vitals, calm and efficient. But all she could hear was David's voice across the room. "Ethan," he said, "you need to pick up right now. It's Rachel. There's been an incident on your flight." Rachel's heart skipped. David looked at her as he said it. "Your flight, your wife." He stepped outside, still speaking urgently. "No, she's safe, but she needs medical attention, and yes, it's bad, very bad." Chloe stood silently beside Rachel, her hands clasped tightly. Rachel turned to her, eyes heavy with pain. "You said earlier you've seen too much of this." Chloe nodded slowly. "Deborah's been protected a long time. Nobody wanted to speak up. Most just transferred off her roots. I stayed because someone had to stay." Rachel breathed deeply, pain easing slightly under the warmth of the blanket. The baby kicked, gently this time. Across the glass doors, David paced like a man awaiting orders from a war room. Rachel didn't know exactly what would happen next, but she knew this. One call had been made. And Ethan Walker wasn't just her husband. He was the man who built this airline, and he was already on his way. The conference room at the Four Seasons San Francisco was a masterpiece of luxury and control. Glass walls overlooked the skyline, and the air hummed with the quiet intensity of power brokers in suits discussing billions in play. At the head of the table sat Ethan Walker, calm, composed, commanding. He'd just delivered a flawless breakdown of Orion Air's Q3 metrics, hands gesturing over sleek charts projected onto the crystal-clear screen behind him. Investors leaned forward. The energy was right. A major international partnership was within grasp. Until his phone buzzed. Ethan glanced down, just for a second. David Rivera, Station MGR JFK. Urgent. Rachel. Incident on board Orion 111. She's safe but shaken. Medical staff involved. Deborah Hastings is the crew member. It's bad. He froze. The words hit him like a freight train. His eyes didn't move from the screen, but every muscle in his body tightened. "Excuse me," he said, voice flat, neutral. He stood, adjusting his suit jacket with precise care. "You'll have to continue without me. A family emergency has come up." The room shifted in confusion, but no one dared object. Ethan's presence commanded respect, even in absence. As he stepped out into the hallway, his entire demeanor changed. The practiced calm evaporated, replaced by an icy, hyper-focused rage. He didn't call his assistant. He didn't call his driver. He called Jessica Alvarez. The phone barely rang once. "Jessica, how fast can you get into the secure legal server?" "I'm in," came her voice, sharp and alert. "What's happened?" "There's been an incident on Flight 111. Deborah Hastings is the purser. Rachel was the victim." A pause. "Oh my God." "She's okay, for now. She's with medics. I'm not waiting for HR. This goes to the core." Jessica didn't hesitate. "Understood. What do you need?" "Pull Deborah's entire employment file. Every route she's flown, every formal complaint, every informal grievance logged or suppressed. I want performance reviews, crew feedback, exit interviews from anyone who flew with her in the last 5 years." "Copy that." Ethan ended the call and immediately dialed again. "Daniel," he barked as the head of operations picked up. "Full sweep. I want every inch of security footage from 111. Boarding, cabin, lounge, anything within FAA parameters. Sir, we have standard cams, but internal footage on that aircraft. Activate override access and start scanning guest feedback on Deborah. Key phrases: rude, disrespectful, intimidating, unprofessional. I want every flagged word in our CRM system linked to her ID. Every single one." "Yes, Mr. Walker." Ethan reached for the third call. This time, PR. "Celine, initiate code violet." There was a sharp inhale on the other end. "Sir, that protocol's reserved for..." "This is that level and then some. You're going to want to get ahead of this because once the footage leaks, we'll be buried unless we lead the narrative." "What's the message?" "The truth. No corporate spin. We acknowledge. We take responsibility. And we act. Fast." Ethan ended the call, jaw locked. He pulled out his phone once more, hesitating only a moment before dialing the only number that mattered. Rachel. It rang twice. "Eve," he said. "Are you all right? I just got the message." Her voice cracked through the speaker, low and tired. "Ethan, I'm okay. The baby, still moving, but I was hit. She hit me." Ethan shut his eyes for half a second, pain flashing through him like lightning. "I'm so sorry. I'm leaving now. Jet's being fueled. You'll be okay. We'll fix this." "I didn't want to bother you, but David called you anyway." "He did exactly the right thing." She paused. "You're not just angry, are you?" "I'm beyond angry. I'm surgical." Another silence. Then Rachel whispered, "Be careful. Don't act from rage." "I won't," Ethan said. "But I will act, with precision. And when I'm done, this won't just be about one flight." He ended the call, already walking toward the elevator. As he stepped inside, he looked at himself in the mirrored walls. Still the CEO. Still the man who had built Orion Air from the ground up. But now he was also the husband of the woman his airline had failed. And failure had a cost. By the time he stepped into the private hangar, the jet was already waiting. Engines warm. Crew standing by. As he boarded, his phone pinged. "Jessica. Deborah's file is spotless. Too spotless. Zero complaints, but I found 3 exit interviews that mention her by behavior, not name. Tone issues. Staff morale problems. Pattern of intimidation. We're digging." Daniel. "One flagged passenger report from last year described a blonde purser as dismissive and cruel. Never escalated. No follow-up." Celine. "We're drafting the public statement. Do you want it before takeoff?" Ethan. "I want it before the wheels leave the ground." He sank into the leather seat and strapped in. The irony not lost on him. Seatbelt secured. Cabin pressure stable. But the fallout? That was going to be seismic. He stared out the window as the jet rumbled to life. Next stop, JFK, and the reckoning. Liam sat in the departure terminal, earbuds out, fingers still shaking. His phone screen was glowing with the paused video. Rachel, composed, rational, gently requesting a seatbelt extender. Deborah's sneer, her hissed threats. Then, the slap. Sharp, echoing, indefensible. He rewound it again, not because he doubted what he saw, but because part of him couldn't believe it had happened. The timestamp read 6:37 p.m. He glanced around. No reporters yet, no security. Just passengers lost in layovers and gate changes, unaware that a storm was gathering in the palm of his hand. He opened X, formerly Twitter, uploaded the clip, and typed, "Just witnessed a senior flight attendant slap a pregnant black woman in first class. She asked for a seatbelt extender. That's it. I have it all on video. This was at Orion Air Flight 1011 JFK LHR. Do not let this get buried. #Justice for Rachel Orion. Air." He pressed post. The ripples were instant. Within 10 minutes, it had 3,000 views. By 30 minutes, 72,000. By the end of the hour, it was trending in New York, then nationwide. The algorithm had caught the scent of outrage, and the world was hungry. A viral thread soon followed from an influencer in 3D who had also been on the flight. I didn't get the full story at first, but I watched the slap. I saw that woman's face. She was calm, dignified. She didn't raise her voice once. The crew member? Cold, aggressive. #Orion Air must answer for this. Another thread came from a woman in 1C. "We were all silent, shocked, and that's part of the problem. She needed backup, and we were frozen. Never again. Justice for Rachel." X turned into a confession booth. Witness after witness confirmed Rachel's composure, her restraint, her very existence as the opposite of threat. Then came the twist. An anonymous post from a new account tagged @Orion Air Staff Truth. "I used to fly with Deborah Hastings. I quit because of her. Her tone, her abuse of junior crew, her disdain for certain passengers. It was unbearable. We were told to keep quiet. Not anymore." It included a screenshot, an internal chat where Deborah had mocked a passenger's accent and attitude during a flight last year. The name was blurred, but the intent was clear. It took 12 minutes for the post to hit 100,000 views. Then CNN picked it up. Breaking. Viral video shows Orion Air purser striking pregnant passenger. Airline confirms flight diverted, passenger hospitalized. The footage played with pixelated faces. but the audio rang loud and clear. The slap, the gasp, the horror. Rachel hadn't even seen it yet. She lay back in a private room at Lenox Hill Hospital, eyes closed, fetal monitor beeping steadily beside her. Her cheek was still red, her stomach tight but stable. A nurse checked her vitals again and smiled softly. "Still steady," she said. "Your baby's heartbeat is strong." Rachel nodded faintly. She hadn't spoken much since arriving. The shock hadn't faded. If anything, the quiet made it louder. Chloe stood outside the room, phone in hand, scrolling through the maelstrom of hashtags and mentions. The clip had now been translated into 5 languages. International news were calling it an industry scandal. Protesters were organizing to demonstrate at JFK. Boycotts were trending. But Chloe didn't care about the noise. She was staring at one thread in particular, the confession from the former crew member. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Then she tapped open her notes app and began typing. "To whom it may concern, my name is Chloe Mason. I am a flight attendant with Orion Air. I was on board Flight 111 and witnessed the incident involving purser Deborah Hastings and passenger Dr. Rachel Walker. I can confirm Dr. Walker did not violate protocol. She requested reasonable accommodations and was denied, ridiculed, and ultimately assaulted. I am willing to provide a full statement. Sincerely, Chloe Mason." Her finger hovered over the send button. A single tap, and her entire future could change. She thought about the quiet threats, the whispered warnings about Deborah, the way people were moved off her flights, not because she was right, but because no one wanted to deal with her. She thought about Rachel, the way she hadn't shouted, hadn't retaliated, had only tried to protect herself and her child. Then Chloe tapped send. Her message landed in the inbox of Jessica Alvarez, General Counsel for Orion Air. Less than 5 minutes later, she received a reply. "Chloe, thank you. We will protect your anonymity if requested, but your statement is invaluable. You are doing the right thing. Jessica Alvarez." Chloe exhaled for the first time in hours. She looked through the glass into Rachel's room, and she knew silence was no longer an option. Not for her. Not for anyone. Deborah Hastings walked through the marble-tiled corridors of Orion Air's JFK Operations Center with the confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times. Her heels clicked with precision. Her uniform was crisp, scarf knotted to regulation. She held her chin high despite the mess of the previous night. It had been a long one. After being pulled off the flight, she'd been placed on immediate administrative leave pending review, standard protocol. Union representation secured. Statement prepared. Script rehearsed. She had spent the night spinning a tight, practiced narrative. Passenger became aggressive, refused to stay seated, demanded special treatment. She stood during taxi, violated FAA policy. Deborah had leaned in to de-escalate. The contact, unfortunate, unintentional, a misunderstood gesture in a high-stress moment. 22 years of spotless service, and one oversensitive passenger was trying to ruin her career. She rolled her shoulders back and stepped into the elevator. By the time it opened on the 34th floor, she was fully in character. Wronged employee, calm under pressure, professional to the last. The receptionist barely met her eyes. "You're expected," she said, pressing a button on the phone. "Deborah Hastings here for the interview," Deborah announced, projecting her voice as if the room were full of allies. "Please proceed to conference room 1, the woman said. That was odd. Interviews were typically held in smaller HR interview spaces. Conference room 1 was larger, formal, intimidating. But Deborah didn't hesitate. She smoothed the hem of her blazer and walked forward, heels echoing like a gavel. She reached the frosted glass doors and pulled them open. Her confidence evaporated the moment she stepped inside. This wasn't an interview. This was a tribunal. The room was cavernous, long mahogany tables stretching toward floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the tarmac outside. At the far end sat 4 people: Jessica Alvarez, legal counsel; Daniel Chen, head of HR; Celine Miles, public affairs. And at the head of the table, flanked by silence itself, sat Ethan Walker, the CEO, her CEO. His face was unreadable, expression smooth, almost serene, but his eyes? Piercing, focused, lethal. Deborah froze in the doorway. "Please," Ethan said. His voice was calm, even pleasant. "Have a seat." The chair at the far end was positioned deliberately, alone, exposed. She walked toward it on legs that suddenly didn't feel steady. She sat down slowly, placing her hands on her knees, then clasping them tightly to stop the tremble. "I was told this was a debrief," she said, forcing a polite smile. "I have my union rep on standby." "This is a fact-finding session," Jessica said coolly, "not a disciplinary hearing. You'll be given full opportunity to respond, but given the severity of the allegations and the presence of certain evidence, we felt this room was more appropriate." Deborah's eyes flicked to the screen mounted on the wall. It was blank. For now. "Ms. Hastings," Ethan began, his voice still soft. "You've been with Orion for 22 years. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "And you've served on over 3,000 flights?" "Yes." "Have you ever had a passenger complaint filed against you?" "No," she said quickly. "Never formally." "And how many of those passengers were pregnant women of color?" he asked. She blinked. I don't know. That data isn't something I track." "No, but your behavior toward one is something we're now all tracking," Ethan replied. Deborah stiffened. "Mr. Walker, with all due respect, I followed protocol." She stood during taxi. "That is a violation of FAA safety standards." "You didn't answer her request for a seatbelt extender," Daniel interjected. "I assessed she didn't require one." "You're not qualified to make that medical judgment," Jessica said. Deborah pressed her lips together. "I've been trained to make calls in the interest of safety. I have the authority to manage my cabin." "And you chose," Ethan said, his voice now quieter, "to manage that situation with a slap?" Her breath caught. "It wasn't a slap," she said quickly. "It was a defensive movement." She was rising from her seat. I leaned in, my hand was raised, and there was contact. "You weren't defending, you were escalating," Celine said. "Multiple passengers said your tone was aggressive from the beginning." "She was confrontational." Ethan stood. The sudden movement stopped everything. He walked to the end of the table, pressed a button on the console, and the wall screen came to life. A security feed. Grainy, but clear. Rachel in 1A, calm, speaking. Deborah looming, pointing, getting louder. Rachel standing slowly, carefully, hand over belly. Then, the swing, the slap. The room fell silent except for the replayed gasp of the cabin. Deborah's eyes welled. "That angle, there's no sound." "We have that too," Ethan said. He pressed play on the second video. Liam's recording. Crisp, audible. Rachel. "I'm asking for safety." Deborah. "You people always want exceptions." Rachel. "I'm a doctor." Deborah. "That's nice, honey. So is my niece." Then, the hiss, the slap. Deborah dropped her gaze. "I didn't know she was your wife," she whispered. Ethan stepped closer, voice low and cutting. "That's your defense?" Deborah's voice cracked. "I followed protocol." "No," Ethan said, voice now steel. "You followed prejudice." The room remained still, the weight of the videos hanging heavy in the air like smoke. Deborah sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, as if trying to summon a defense that had long since disintegrated. Ethan Walker stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, not with aggression, but with unmistakable finality. His gaze never wavered from Deborah, though his voice remained controlled. "We've now reviewed footage from 2 separate sources," he said. "The onboard security camera from Suite 1A and the passenger video captured by Mr. Liam Carter in 2A. Jessica Alvarez spoke next, flipping through the pages of a printed transcript. The passenger's audio file clearly captures your words, Ms. Hastings. Verbatim. You people always want exceptions. That phrasing alone violates at least 3 points in our company's anti-discrimination and conduct policies. Deborah's eyes darted to each person at the table, desperately searching for an opening, for anything resembling sympathy. Instead, she found Stone. "Mr. Walker," she said finally, voice shaking. "Please, I didn't know who she was." Ethan's expression didn't change. "And that," he said, "is your defense?" "I didn't know she was your wife," Deborah blurted, the dam of her composure cracking wide open. "I wouldn't have. If I had known, I never would have." Ethan's voice dropped to a quiet, dangerous whisper. "That's not an explanation. That's an indictment." She blinked, confused. "What? You're telling me that the only reason you would have shown her basic human decency is if you'd known her name, if you'd known her proximity to power, if she were connected." Deborah opened her mouth, but Ethan continued, his tone laced with quiet fury. "So what if she weren't my wife, Ms. Hastings? What if she were just Rachel Walker, a pregnant black doctor trying to get home to her dying father? Would she still deserve to be ridiculed, denied safety, and struck in front of a cabin full of witnesses?" Deborah lowered her eyes. Tears welled up, then spilled freely. Her hands clenched tightly in her lap. I was overwhelmed. She was difficult. She was calm." Jessica cut in. "We have multiple statements from passengers and crew confirming she never raised her voice, never made demands, and complied with every instruction. Until you crossed a line." Celine, the PR head, placed a printed page on the table in front of Deborah. "These are the headlines running worldwide," she said. "CNN, BBC, Reuters, Orion Air purser assaults pregnant black doctor. Your name is now a hashtag, your face, a symbol of systemic arrogance. And this company? It's bleeding public trust by the second." Deborah stared at the page, her own image staring back, pixelated, mid-motion, mouth twisted in fury as her hand arced toward Rachel's face. "I didn't mean to hurt her," she whispered. It happened so fast." "No," Ethan said sharply. "It didn't happen fast. It built up, over years. Years of unchecked behavior, of subtle cruelty, of complaints that never became reports, of power used not to protect, but to punish." He walked slowly to the end of the table, leaning on his hands, his eyes locked on hers. "You wore our uniform for 22 years, Ms. Hastings. That uniform means something. It represents care, dignity, and excellence. You turned it into a weapon." Deborah's shoulders sagged. The tears had given way to a quiet, breathless sobbing. Her mascara ran in dark streaks down her cheeks, pooling at the edges of a face that once wore authority like armor. "What happens now?" she asked, barely audible. Jessica answered, her voice professional, precise. "Your employment with Orion Air is terminated effective immediately. Your credentials are revoked. You will be escorted from the building by security at the conclusion of this meeting." Deborah nodded weakly. "And," Jessica added, "you should also know that our legal team is cooperating fully with the district attorney's office. A criminal investigation into the assault has already been opened." Deborah's head shot up. "Criminal? You struck a pregnant passenger in the presence of witnesses and cameras," Daniel Chen, the head of HR, said grimly. "This is not a labor dispute. This is battery." A beat of silence followed. Then Ethan spoke once more. "This could have been avoided," he said softly. "Had you shown the smallest amount of empathy, had you paused for 1 second to listen." I just thought she was trying to get special treatment," Deborah said, hollow now. "People do that. All the time." "People," Ethan repeated. "Say that word again, slowly." She didn't. He straightened, smoothing the edge of his suit. "Security is waiting outside," Jessica said. "We'll give you a moment." Deborah stood slowly. Her knees buckled slightly, but she caught herself. No one moved to help. She looked one last time at the screen behind them, frozen on the frame of her hand mid-swing. Then she walked out, shoulders hunched, heels dragging. The door closed behind her with a quiet, echoing thud. No one spoke, not for a long time. Then Ethan turned to his team. "This doesn't end here," he said. "We cut out the tumor. Now we treat the disease." The press conference was set for noon, but by 11:23 a.m., the Orion Air headquarters atrium was packed. Reporters from every major network had descended on the downtown Austin skyscraper, cameras lined up like artillery. The backdrop was stark, Orion's silver and blue logo against a white canvas, flanked by the flags of the United States and the FAA. Celine Miles stood just off stage, headset in one ear, eyes locked on her team. She had worked through the night with PR analysts, legal counsel, and crisis managers. This wasn't just another corporate apology. It was war. Her final email to all comm staff had been clear. Under no circumstances will anyone use the terms incident, allegation, or alleged misconduct. Replace with assault, failure, and apology. We own it. We do not spin it. The air in the room buzzed with anticipation. Live feeds were already rolling. Headlines on every major site ran in sync. Orion Air CEO to address viral assault scandal. Had justice for Rachel goes global. Will this be the end for Orion? At exactly 12:00 p.m., Ethan Walker stepped onto the platform. No tie, sleeves rolled up, no teleprompter. He walked directly to the podium and looked out into the sea of lenses and expectant eyes. "My name is Ethan Walker," he began, voice steady. "I am the CEO and founder of Orion Air. I come before you today not to manage this crisis, but to accept responsibility for it." A wave of clicks echoed through the hall as cameras snapped in rapid-fire succession. 3 days ago, on one of our flights departing JFK, a pregnant passenger, Dr. Rachel Walker, was physically assaulted by one of our senior crew members. The video is public, the evidence is undeniable, and that passenger is my wife. The room gasped. Ethan let the moment land before continuing. She was not recognized, not because of a glitch or oversight, but because the culture we allowed to grow in our company failed to treat her with the basic dignity every person deserves. This was not an incident. This was an assault, and this was our failure. His voice grew firmer, though it never rose. "We have terminated the employment of Deborah Hastings, effective immediately. We are filing a civil suit against her for brand and operational damages, and we are cooperating fully with law enforcement in the ongoing criminal investigation." Ethan paused, his hands gripping the podium edge. "But that's not enough." The reporters leaned forward. Even the cameras seemed to hush. "Effective tonight, Orion Air will suspend all domestic and international operations for a period of 72 hours. We are grounding our entire fleet." A wave of murmurs surged through the room. Every employee, flight crew, ground staff, leadership, will report for mandatory training. Not just sensitivity training, not just a slide deck. We are overhauling our entire internal culture, top to bottom. We will confront bias, we will retrain leadership, and we will rebuild trust. One reporter finally stood. "Mr. Walker, isn't a full shutdown, worldwide, a bit extreme?" Ethan looked directly at her. "Not when the cost of doing nothing is higher. Not when lives, reputations, and dignity are at stake." He turned slightly to glance at the screen behind him. It now displayed 3 words: assault, failure, apology. "I chose these words carefully," he continued, "because they are not just legal definitions or PR terms. They are moral truths. A woman, my wife, was harmed under our banner. We failed to protect her. And now, we say sorry, not with words, but with action." Celine stood motionless at the edge of the room, tears prickling the corners of her eyes. It was rare to see a CEO walk into the fire like this. But Ethan wasn't walking. He was standing in it, owning it. He continued. Dr. Walker asked for a basic safety measure, a seatbelt extender. She was mocked, dismissed, and then struck. And if that had happened to any other passenger, of any other race, gender, or status, I would be just as outraged. Another reporter called out, "Will she be speaking publicly?" Ethan nodded slowly. In time, but for now, her priority is rest and recovery. And mine is to ensure that what happened to her never happens to anyone else. He stepped back from the podium and glanced at the press kit on the table nearby. Dozens of folders, each with the new policy reforms, training mandates, and copies of the internal memos already sent to Orion's 22,000 employees. Before turning to leave, he looked once more into the cameras. We're not going to fix this in a day, but we will fix it, because if we don't deserve to fly. He walked off stage in silence. No applause, just the sound of accountability echoing louder than any headline. The email came just after 3:00 p.m. with the subject line, "Urgent, Media Appearance Request." Chloe stared at it, unread, for a full minute. She was in her studio apartment, a tiny fourth-floor walk-up in Queens, still wearing her Orion Air uniform pants, though the blouse had been tossed across the back of a chair. She hadn't slept in 27 hours. When she finally opened the message, her breath caught. "Chloe, we're receiving dozens of interview requests, and your name has come up repeatedly in coverage as a credible, heroic witness. Ethan would like to formally invite you to represent Orion in the upcoming CNN Town Hall segment on airline bias and reform. You would not be speaking on behalf of the company in legal terms, but as a voice of integrity. Let us know, ASAP. Celine Miles, VP, Communications." She sat back in her chair, heart pounding. The very idea of going on national television, her face, her voice, her story, terrified her. But something deeper tugged at her. She remembered Rachel's face, not just the slap, but what came before it. The dignity, the restraint, the grace under humiliation. Chloe took a deep breath and typed a short reply. "I'll do it." The CNN set was sleek, dimly lit with a backdrop of skyline and motion graphics labeled, "Beyond the Seat, Systemic Bias in the Skies." Chloe sat beside two other panelists, a diversity expert and a former flight attendant who'd spoken anonymously in the first viral thread. Cameras rolled. Red lights blinked. The host turned to her. "Chloe, you were on Flight 111. You witnessed the entire interaction. What compelled you to come forward?" Chloe folded her hands in her lap. "I didn't plan to," she admitted. "But then I watched the clip, and I saw how calm Dr. Walker was. I saw how easily the narrative could have shifted if no one had spoken up." The host nodded. "You've since been praised as a whistleblower. Some are calling you the new face of ethical aviation. How does that feel?" Chloe blinked. "I didn't do it for praise. I did it because silence is a kind of violence. And because, if I'm honest, I've been where she was." The host tilted his head. "Can you elaborate?" Chloe inhaled slowly. "I'm biracial. Grew up in Chicago. First in my family to go to college. I've been told to smile more by supervisors. Been mistaken for a baggage handler while in uniform. Been talked down to by passengers who assumed I didn't understand English because my last name is Mason, but my dad's name is Alvarez." She let that hang for a second. Rachel didn't just need protection because she was pregnant. She needed it because she was invisible to the system, until the system got caught. The room was quiet. Then the host asked, "What do you hope comes from all this?" Chloe didn't hesitate. "I hope airlines stop acting like diversity is a badge and start treating it like a responsibility. I hope crew members start calling each other out when they see disrespect. I hope passengers realize we're all human beings, not titles or ticket numbers." Applause broke out from the in-studio audience. Later that night, Chloe got a second message. This time, from Ethan himself. "Chloe, you spoke with honor. Rachel would like to see you, if you're willing. She's still at Lenox Hill. Let me know and I'll arrange everything." Ethan Chloe replied immediately, "Of course, I'd be honored." The hospital room was quiet, bathed in late afternoon light. The monitors blinked rhythmically beside Rachel's bed, soft beeping a constant reminder of life. She sat propped up, a blanket across her lap, a small smile on her face as Chloe entered. "Hi," Rachel said softly. Chloe smiled back. "Hi." For a moment, they just looked at each other. No cameras, no press. Just two women, finally face to face. "Thank you," Rachel said, voice thick with emotion, "for not looking away, for speaking up. I have been in that seat before, too many times, and no one said anything." Chloe sat in the chair beside her. "You didn't deserve that. Not as a passenger, not as a person, and not as a woman." Rachel chuckled softly. "You'd be surprised how often those three don't overlap." They both laughed. A light, fragile sound. Then Chloe said, "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone in uniform?" Rachel nodded. "There was a passenger once, months ago. He called me the diversity hire. Say, right to my face. I reported it. My supervisor said, 'Don't take it personally. Some people are old-fashioned.'" Rachel's eyes narrowed. "That's not old-fashioned. That's bigotry wrapped in nostalgia." "Exactly," Chloe said. "And I thought, if I speak up again, I'll get labeled. Too sensitive. A liability. So I didn't. Until now." Chloe nodded. Rachel reached out, hand resting gently on Chloe's. "I'm glad you did." They sat in silence for a while, not needing to fill the space, just sharing it. Two women, two shades of resilience, two stories that had, in different ways, collided at 30,000 feet and landed somewhere that looked a lot like hope. The hallway outside room 517 at Lenox Hill Hospital was quiet, save for the gentle squeak of Ethan Walker's shoes on polished tile. In his hand, he held a bouquet, small, understated. Rachel didn't like grand gestures. She preferred things real. He paused just outside the door, his breath catching for the first time in days. It had been 72 hours since the flight, since the video, since the slap that shattered more than silence. He'd moved through the chaos like a man possessed, anchored by fury, guided by duty. But here, at the threshold of her recovery, he felt exposed. He knocked softly and pushed the door open. Rachel sat upright in bed, propped on pillows, reading a slim paperback. Her eyes lifted, and when they met his, they softened into something neither weary nor broken, but deeply alive. "Hey," he said, stepping in. "Hey," she echoed, voice still hoarse, but stronger than he expected. He crossed the room quickly, set the bouquet on the nightstand, and reached for her hand. She took it without hesitation, their fingers lacing like instinct. "How are you?" he asked. Rachel tilted her head slightly. "Tired, sore, angry, grateful. You know, the full emotional buffet." Ethan chuckled softly, but there was no amusement behind it, only reverence. "The baby?" he asked, voice tightening. Rachel nodded. "Heartbeat steady, movement is good. They're keeping me overnight just to monitor one more round, but we're okay." He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for days. "I'm so sorry, Eve." Rachel looked at him for a long moment, then shook her head. "Don't apologize for what she did." "I'm not," he said. "I'm apologizing for what I didn't stop. For every culture report I ignored, for every glowing performance review built on silence, for building something beautiful and failing to see the rot underneath." She squeezed his hand. "You didn't slap me, Ethan." "No, but I built the seat she sat in. I funded the system that protected her. That's on me." Rachel nodded slowly. "Then fix it." "I will," he promised. "Not just for you, for every passenger. Every crew member who's ever been dismissed, diminished, or discarded. We're not just revising training. We're rewriting the code." She smiled faintly. "Sounds like a revolution." He sat beside her now, the chair creaking as he lowered into it. "How's the outside world?" she asked. "Exploding," he replied. "The town hall went viral. Chloe's a national hero. We've grounded the fleet for 3 days and might extend it. I've had meetings with advocacy groups, industry watchdogs. Even the FAA is watching closely. We're not just under a microscope, we're under a spotlight. And you're not hiding from it? He shook his head. Not for a second. Rachel closed her eyes briefly. Good. A long silence passed between them, not awkward, but thick with everything unspoken. Then Rachel opened her eyes and said quietly, "He died." Ethan blinked. "Who?" "My dad." He sat up straighter, stunned. "When?" "While I was in the air," she whispered. "Right around the time she slapped me, probably." Ethan reached for her hand again, tighter this time. "Oh, Rachel." She didn't cry. She'd done that already, alone, in the cold hum of the hospital room, when the nurse handed her the message from London. "He's gone, peacefully. He waited as long as he could." "I missed it," she said softly. "Missed holding his hand. Missed his last words. And yet, a part of me feels relieved." Ethan frowned gently, not with judgment, but with compassion. "Relieved?" She nodded. "He's not in pain anymore. He didn't see me broken, didn't see the headlines. He got to go with dignity, something I had to fight to keep." Ethan lowered his gaze. "You shouldn't have had to." "No, but I did, and I'm still here, and so is this child." They sat in silence again, listening to the soft beep of the fetal monitor. Life, rhythmic and insistent. "I never told you what he used to say when I got tired of fighting," Rachel said. Ethan shook his head. He'd say, "Don't let them steal your silence. Let it be your power. Make them lean in to hear you win." Ethan smiled, something pained and proud. "He sounds like the kind of man who raised a woman that could change an entire industry with her calm." Rachel laughed, low and tired. "Let's not oversell it." "I'm not," he said. "You're not just my wife, Rachel. You're the mirror this company didn't know it needed. And now that the glass is cracked, we're going to rebuild the frame around it." He stood, kissed her forehead, then her hand. "I have to go prepare for the board meeting, but I'll be back tonight, with soup." "From that little Korean place?" "The only one." As he turned to leave, she called out softly, "Ethan?" He paused. "Thank you, for being louder than me when I couldn't be." He met her eyes. "Only because you taught me how." And with that, he stepped out, leaving the door slightly ajar, not out of negligence, but as a promise. Some silences weren't meant to be broken. They were meant to be shared. 6 months later, the ballroom of the Intercontinental Hotel in Washington, D.C. was filled with more than just executives and press. Teachers, flight attendants, civil rights leaders, students, survivors of silence. They were all there for the same reason: the launch of the Rachel Walker Initiative. The lights dimmed slightly as the stage lit up. A banner stretched across the back wall in simple navy and gold. Dignity in flight, equality in service. Below it, a logo, Orion Air's familiar emblem, but newly joined by a laurel-shaped design of interlocking hands. It wasn't just branding, it was a message. This airline didn't just fly above. It had learned to listen below. Chloe stood near the edge of the stage, fingers clasped, microphone in hand. Her once nervous posture had matured into something steady, resilient. She had been promoted to lead the new Office of Ethical Training and Equity Compliance, a role that didn't exist before Flight 111. Now it did, and she was the one shaping it. She smiled as she addressed the crowd. "When I joined Orion Air, I thought I was just learning how to pour coffee at 30,000 feet. I didn't know I'd be asked to lead a movement, but here we are." Laughter bubbled gently from the audience, but it was reverent. She continued, "The Rachel Walker Initiative isn't about fixing one person or one moment. It's about facing what's been ignored. It's about choosing courage over comfort. And it's about creating an aviation culture where no one, no matter their color, size, age, accent, or condition, has to ask for dignity. It's given." Applause rose, long and sustained. From his front row seat, Ethan Walker stood, stepped onto the stage, and gently hugged Chloe before taking the mic. He looked around the room and took a breath. "I used to think leadership meant protecting the company," he began. Now I know it means protecting its people." He paused, his voice low and deliberate. "When Dr. Rachel Walker, my wife, boarded Flight 111, she wasn't looking for special treatment. She was asking for basic safety, basic respect. She got a slap instead. There was no need to dramatize. The room already knew. That slap," he continued, "wasn't just one woman's hand. It was the weight of a culture we let fester, a failure we allowed to fly again and again. And we didn't just hurt her, we hurt trust itself." He stepped back for a moment, letting silence do what words could not. "That's why this initiative exists. Not to point fingers, but to build frameworks. Not just to fire the guilty, but to train the willing. Because justice," he said, eyes scanning the room, "isn't just a termination, it's transformation." The crowd stood and applauded, louder this time. Not out of protocol, but purpose. Ethan nodded toward the edge of the stage, and the spotlight shifted. Rachel Walker emerged. She wore a deep blue dress and low heels. Her steps were deliberate but strong. Her presence alone quieted the room. She didn't stand at the podium. She simply stepped forward, took the mic from Ethan, and looked directly into the sea of faces before her. "For weeks after it happened," she began, "I couldn't watch the video. Not because I didn't want to relive it, but because I didn't want to become it." A murmur ran through the room. "I didn't want to be reduced to a moment, a victim, a clip. I wanted to be more than what was done to me." She glanced toward Chloe, who nodded silently. And I realized I wasn't alone. The woman who helped me off that plane, she wasn't just a flight attendant. She was a truth teller. The young man who recorded the video, he wasn't just a student. He was a witness. From the side of the room, Liam Carter, now a first-year journalism student at NYU, looked down shyly. The audience clapped, recognizing him. Rachel continued, "This initiative doesn't bear my name because I wanted attention. It bears my name because I gave it my silence, my restraint, my pain. And now it gives something back to everyone who's ever been told to sit down, stay quiet, or take it." She paused. "And here's the thing. What happened to me was prejudice, but what came next," she looked up, eyes bright, voice clear, "was purpose." The room erupted. Not just clapping, but standing, cheering. Not in fanfare, but solidarity. Because in that moment, Rachel Walker wasn't just a passenger. She was the pulse of a movement. And now, the skies would never be the same.